Okay, I want you to picture the book of Revelation for a second. When you close your eyes and think about that book, what do you see?
Oh, the usual suspects, multi-headed dragons, uh, the four horsemen, fire raining from the sky, the end of the world.
Exactly. The apocalypse. It's like the ultimate end times movie script. But I've been reading through this deep dive you prepared on a paper called The Message in Revelation, and honestly, it made me look at the whole thing
Yeah.
differently.
It really flips the script, doesn't it?
It does, because the premise here isn't about the future, it's about the past. The source argues that we have been misreading this book for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
It's not a prediction of the end of the world as we know it, it's a political hit piece. A specific, targeted takedown of a rival religious leader in the first century.
And that is where it gets controversial, because the rival isn't like a Roman emperor or some pagan king.
No, the bad guy in this version of the story is the Apostle Paul.
It sounds radical, I know, but when you start to lay out the evidence, the timeline, the geography, the code words, it creates this incredibly tight case.
A civil war.
A civil war was happening in the early church. Yeah, we aren't looking at a unified front. We are looking at a battle for the soul of the whole movement.
And the stakes here are huge. I mean, usually I just open the New Testament and it's all one big happy family, Matthew, Mark, Paul, Revelation. It's just the Bible.
Right.
But the source leads with this idea of a hierarchy of authority that completely disrupts that. Can you break that down for us?
Right. So to understand the argument, you have to think like a first century Jew. You have to look at the structure of Scripture.
Okay.
Think of it like a pyramid of authority. In Jewish tradition, the Tanakh isn't just a flat list of books. It has tiers. At the very top, the absolute peak, you have the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. That is the Constitution. Nothing can contradict it.
Okay, so that's the Supreme Court.
Right. Then, one step down, you have the Nevi'im, the prophets. They are authoritative, God-breathed, but they serve the Torah.
Right.
And then at the bottom, you have the Ketuvim, the writings, Psalms, Proverbs, histories.
So a clear pecking order. You can't use a psalm to override Moses.
Exactly. Now, here's the key move the source makes. It applies that same filter to the New Testament.
Okay.
The Gospels, those are the new Torah. They are the life and words of Yeshua, top tier.
Okay, I follow.
But what comes next? In the Old Testament, the second tier is prophecy. And there is only one book of prophecy in the New Testament.
Revelation.
Revelation, which means, according to this structure, Revelation sits in the second tier. It outranks everything below it.
And what's below it?
The epistles.
The letters.
Wait, so Paul's letters? Romans, Corinthians, Galatians.
Under this framework, they are mere writings, bottom tier. The argument here is massive.
So if there's a conflict between Revelation and Paul?
Paul loses. Paul's the one who is illegitimate. That is wild, because usually people use Paul's letters to explain Revelation.
Yeah.
This source is saying, no, Revelation was written to correct Paul.
Precisely. And the source points out that historically, supporters of Paul have often been uncomfortable with Revelation. They've tried to move it to the back of the canon, or in some centuries, remove it entirely.
And I guess we're about to see why.
Yeah, you might start to see why.
Well, this is a lot to take in. But if we're going to prove a conspiracy like this, we need motive and opportunity. Where is this war actually happening?
Okay, so we have to look at the scene of the crime, Ephesus. This was a major hub in Asia Minor.
Right.
And we know from the book of Acts that Paul spent years there. It was his base of operations.
Okay, so Paul established the church there. He's the founder.
Right. But look at the timeline the source proposes. It argues Revelation was likely written prior to 70 CE.
Before the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed.
Yes, the text treats the temple as if it's still standing. So we have John, the author of Revelation, likely in or near Ephesus, and then exiled to Patmos. But look at what Paul writes near the end of his life in his second letter to Timothy. He sounds bitter.
What did he say?
He writes, "Everyone from the province of Asia has deserted me."
Everyone. That's not just a minor split. That's a total collapse of his support.
It implies a massive rejection. Now, keep that desertion in mind and flip over to Revelation chapter 2, the message to the church in Ephesus. Jesus commends them.
Commends them for what?
For testing those who call themselves apostles and are not, and finding them to be false.
Oh, wow. Okay, I see the connection. So if Paul says, they all left me, and Revelation says, good job rejecting those false apostles.
The source connects those dots. It suggests the false apostles, John is congratulating the Ephesians for rejecting are actually Paul and his team.
That is personal. It feels incredibly personal. But why reject him? I mean, what was the beef?
It wasn't just personality, it was theological. The source highlights a major clash regarding the vision of Jesus.
How so?
Revelation 1.7 says, "Behold, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him."
Right. A public event. Undeniable.
But consider Paul's claim to apostleship. It's based on a private vision. Only he saw it, or at least only he understood it. And the source brings up a warning from Matthew 24.25, where Jesus warns his followers about false messiahs, he says. If they tell you he is in the wilderness, do not go out.
And where did Paul's conversion happen?
Road to Damascus, in the wilderness.
So the source is arguing that John is basically subtweeting Paul here, saying real revelation is public, not some secret meeting in the desert.
Essentially, yes. It challenges the very basis of Paul's authority. If you haven't seen the physical Jesus, and your only claim is a private vision in the desert that contradicts the public warnings of the Gospels, are you really an apostle?
That is a harsh question.
Yeah.
But it gets much more specific than just broad hints, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We need to talk about the code words.
Yes.
Because Revelation is full of symbolic language, and the source argues this was necessary because it was written under political duress.
Right. If you write a letter saying Paul is a liar, that letter gets burned. If you write, "Beware of Balaam," the people who know the code get the message, and the outsiders just think it's a Bible story.
Okay, let's unpack the code words. The Nicolaitans. Revelation says God hates their works. I've always wondered who these guys were.
This is one of those aha moments the source provides. It's a linguistic puzzle. Nicolaitans comes from the Greek Nikolaos.
Okay.
Nikon means to conquer, and laos means the people. Conqueror of the people.
Conqueror of the people. Got it.
Now look at the Hebrew name Balaam. Bala means to destroy or consume, and Am means people. Destroyer of the people.
Wait, so Nicolaitans and Balaamites are the same thing?
The source argues that Nicolaitans is just the Greek translation of Balaamites. They're the same group.
But why does that matter? Who is Balaam?
Balaam is a figure from the Old Testament, from Numbers. He was a prophet for hire who couldn't curse Israel directly, so he figured out a different way to destroy them. He taught them to compromise, specifically to eat food sacrificed to idols and to practice immorality.
Eating food sacrificed to idols. Wait a minute, that sounds familiar. That was a huge issue in the New Testament.
It was the hot-button issue of the day. And this is the smoking gun for the source. What was the major controversy Paul was dealing with in Corinthians?
Right, eating meat sacrificed to idols.
The source points out that Paul explicitly taught that it was acceptable. In 1 Corinthians 8 and 10, he basically says, an idol is nothing, it's just a piece of wood, so go ahead and eat.
But he has that little caveat, right? Just don't cause a scandal for someone with a weak conscience.
Exactly. But the apostles in Jerusalem, James and that group, they had a strict rule against that, didn't they?
They did, in Acts 15. The Jerusalem Council.
Yes. They send out a letter to the Gentiles. They give them very few rules, but one of the non-negotiables is abstain from food sacrificed to idols.
So let's track this. Revelation condemns the teaching of Balaam, which is eating food sacrificed to idols.
Yep.
Paul teaches that eating food sacrificed to idols is okay.
Exactly. The source argues that when John writes about Balaam, he is using a code name for Paul. To John, Paul is the new Balaam, the guy telling people, hey, it's okay to blend in with the pagans, eat the meat, it doesn't matter.
That is heavy.
Wow.
So when Revelation condemns Pergamum for holding to the teaching of Balaam, or Thyatira for tolerating Jezebel, who teaches the same thing,
the source sees a pattern. These heretics aren't some obscure mystery cult. They are communities following standard Pauline doctrine.
they're just Paul's churches.
Specifically, following the idea that the law of the Torah is no longer binding. The source frames this as the lawlessness or immorality that Revelation is so angry about.
Which brings us to the works versus faith debate. I mean, this is the classic Protestant versus Catholic or Christian versus Jewish debate.
It is.
Paul is famous for faith, not works.
Exactly. Paul writes that no one is justified by works of the law. But look at the letters to the 7 churches in Revelation. How does almost every single one start?
I know your works.
I know your works. Not I know your faith, not I know what you believe. To the church in Sardis, he says, I have not found your works complete.
Wow.
The source argues that Revelation is establishing a standard of behavior halakha, in Jewish terms. It's about what you do, not just what you believe.
And then there's that phrase, the synagogue of Satan. feel like we have to tread carefully here because that phrase has been used in some really terrible ways.
Absolutely. And the source is very specific about how to interpret this in its first century context. It says we have to ask, what was the definition of a Jew at that time?
Following the law, keeping Torah.
Right. But Paul introduced a new concept, being a spiritual Jew. In Romans, he talks about circumcision of the heart, not the flesh.
Right.
He taught that you could be part of the covenant without keeping the law, without circumcision, dietary laws, or Sabbath.
So the source says the synagogue of Satan refers to.
It refers to these Pauline communities, people who claim to be Jews, meaning they claim to be the true heirs of the covenant, but or not because they have abandoned the law.
So it's not an ethnic slur. It's a theological one.
Exactly. It's a critique of this new law-free theology that claims to replace traditional observance. It's basically calling them identity thieves.
In a spiritual sense, yeah.
And then there's the flip side in the message to Smyrna. I know your poverty, but you are rich.
I remember reading that.
This is a fascinating historical nugget. The followers of Jesus in Jerusalem, the group led by James, the brother of Jesus, were known as the poor.
The poor.
In Hebrew, the Ebionim, which is where we get the name for the Ebionites.
Oh, like the Ebionites. I've heard of them. They rejected Paul, right?
Completely. They viewed him as an apostate. So when Revelation tells Smyrna, I know your poverty, the source suggests it's a nod to their alignment with the poor, the anti-Paul faction in Jerusalem.
So they're spiritually rich because they're on the right team?
They've stuck to the original teaching of James and the Jerusalem apostles, even if they're materially poor.
Okay, we have to talk about the elephant in the room.
Ah!
The beast in the room. The number. Everyone has a theory for this. I've heard it's Nero. I've heard it's Hitler. I've heard it's a barcode. Does this source actually try to pin 666 on Paul?
It does.
Because that feels like a stretch. You can make numbers say anything if you try hard enough.
That's a fair skepticism. It's called gematria, assigning numerical value to Hebrew letters. It can be slippery, but the source argues the math here is startlingly direct.
Okay, walk me through it.
You have to look at how Paul would have been identified in a formal Hebrew context. He is Saul. And where is he from?
Tarsus, Saul of Tarsus.
Right. In Hebrew, Tarsus is spelled Tavresh Samek Vav. If you take the name Tarsus, just the identifier of his citizenship, and you add up those values,
I'm almost afraid to ask, what does it equal?
it comes out to exactly 6666.
Saul of Tarsus is 666.
The man from Tarsus. The source suggests that for a Jewish author writing in code, Tarsus was the perfect identifier. It highlights his Roman citizenship, his foreignness, and it fits the math perfectly.
That is coincidental or damning.
The source argues it's intentional, but the evidence goes deeper than just the number. It connects the beast to the little horn in the book of Daniel.
The little horn, that's the one with eyes like a man and speaks arrogantly.
Yes. And Revelation adds a specific detail. The beast blasphemes God's name and his dwelling, his tabernacle.
Dwelling,
Yeah.
meaning the temple.
Correct. Remember, the source posits the temple is still standing when this is written. Now think about Acts 17.24. What does Paul preach in Athens?
He says, the God who made the world does not live in temples built by human hands.
To a Jewish listener in the pre-70 CE era, while the Holy Temple is standing in Jerusalem, the place where God's presence, the Shekinah, is believed to dwell, saying God does not dwell in temples is blasphemy.
It's blaspheming the dwelling.
Exactly. The source argues this is the arrogant speech Revelation is warning about. Paul is going around the empire telling people that the temple in Jerusalem is irrelevant because God doesn't live there.
Wow.
To John, that is the spirit of the beast speaking.
And then there are the miracles. The beast performs miracles to deceive, right? Fire from heaven, surviving mortal wounds.
And the source draws parallels to Paul's life in Acts. He performs unusual miracles. He survives a viper bite on Malta, essentially a mortal wound that doesn't kill him. He strikes opponents blind.
So John sees those miracles differently.
The source suggests John views these not as proof of Paul's holiness, but as testing, the same way the false prophet Balaam had power, but used it to lead people away from the law.
It really paints a picture of two completely different religious movements colliding. And politics plays a huge role here, too. The source talks about Pergamum being Satan's throne.
Yes, Pergamum was the center of the imperial cult in the East. It was where you went to worship the emperor as a god.
So for John, that's Satan's throne.
It is abhorrent. It is the ultimate idolatry. But contrast that with Paul's attitude toward Rome.
Romans 13. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there's no authority except that which God has established.
Exactly. Paul calls the Roman magistrates agents of God. He uses his Roman citizenship for protection. He appeals to Caesar.
So from John's perspective,
The source argues that for John, the Roman Empire is the beast, and Paul, he is the man, the little horn, who is riding that beast, using Roman protection and Roman roads to spread a message that subverts the Jewish resistance.
it flips the script. Instead of Paul being the hero spreading the gospel, he's seen as a collaborator with the empire.
A collaborator who is dissolving the distinctiveness of the Jewish people by telling them the law doesn't matter. To a zealot like John, that is the ultimate betrayal.
So let's zoom out. If this source is right, we have a document revelation that is an anti-Pauline manifesto. It was written by the Jerusalem faction to undo Paul's work in Asia Minor.
That is the argument. It was sent to the very churches Paul founded, warning them to turn back to the works and the law.
And yet, both of these authors, John and Paul, ended up in the same book.
That is the great irony. History, or perhaps the church fathers, merged these two opposing libraries. They took the letters of Paul and the book written to destroy Paul and bound them together in the New Testament.
It's like binding a political attack ad with the biography of the candidate it's attacking.
In a way, yes. And it creates this tension that has existed in Christianity ever since, the tension between faith and works, between the law and grace, between Jerusalem and Rome.
And that leads to the final, uncomfortable question the source leaves us with.
It does. It asks, if the source is correct and 666 is a warning against the man from Tarsus, what does it mean that modern Christianity is largely built on the theology of the very person Revelation warns against?
That is a lot to process. I mean, most Christian theology is Pauline theology.
It is. We read the Gospels through the lens of Paul's letters. So if Revelation is actually saying, do not listen to that guy, it creates a massive paradox at the heart of the faith.
Yeah.
It implies the anti-Paul manifesto became the closing chapter of the book Paul helped define.
It really forces you to ask, who actually won that first century war?
It's a lot to chew on, but that's why we do this. It reminds us that the Bible isn't a monolith. It's a library of voices, and sometimes those voices are arguing with each other.
Absolutely. It definitely changes how I'm going to read those 7 letters next time. Test those who call themselves apostles and are not. Man.
It certainly gives new weight to that verse.
Well, in that bombshell, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for unpacking this with us. And until next time, keep diving deep.